Hey, what's going on, guys? This video will have two parts. I'm going to talk about Noah for the first part of this. I think there's definitely some stuff that's worth talking about. I think both of the big July shows are worth your time, more so than a lot of what Noah have been doing recently. Because honestly, it has been hard to get excited about a lot of what Noah's been doing recently. I mean, what? They had the first 2011 Great Voyage show in Tokyo in early March. That was the one with Kentaro versus Nakajima, Sugiura versus Bernard. That's a really good show, but since then, I don't know. I mean, it's been an extended lull, really. I mean, they had the Fukuoka show in late March with Sugiura versus Murdoch. I really didn't like that show that much. And April was all about the Global Tag League, which you didn't hear me talk about. I don't think I read anyone talk about that tournament with any sort of particular excitement. And then they had the second Great Voyage Tokyo Ariake show in May, which to me was the weakest show they've had all year. I don't know. The pair of Cullican Hall shows from late May, late June, they don't seem to have circulated just yet, but those don't jump out at me either as being particularly must-see. And the European shows, which I will eventually be reviewing, they don't really feel like part of Noah's continuity to me. I mean, there are championship matches on them, and they were televised in Japan, I think, but they don't really feel like part of Noah's continuity because there are so many guys missing. So it's been a hard road this year, but I think July was a good month, and I think there's something to talk about there. So let's go ahead with it. The first one we've got is Great Voyage in Tokyo Volume 3. This is the show that featured the third Shiozaki Sugiura match. It's a good show. The only thing is, again, Ariake Coliseum still determined not to make any noise at all, and it really did hurt the show. I mean, I guess the first one where it was really noticeable was the Takayama 6-man, which, okay, wasn't all that great to begin with, I'll give them that, but it still had some really good interactions, and it might have been very enjoyable if the crowd were giving them anything at all to feed off, and they didn't do that, and I was very low on the crowd after that match, because I was trying hard to be into it, but they just wouldn't let me, so... But there is a good side, there is a positive side to it, because as a result of that, I really loved the way Akiyama and Nakajima worked their match. I mean, Nakajima just goes in there with all this fire, and immediately just brawls with Akiyama, and then tosses him into spectator seats. That's great, throw him into the crowd. Throw him into that stupid crowd and get them into the match. I mean, they did do that, and they got as much out of that crowd as they possibly could. And even if you watch the match in isolation, I think, it's very hard not to connect with Nakajima's desire to prove himself against the veteran heavyweight. The start of it is all about Nakajima getting his offense in. He does well, he spares no expense in getting his point across, and then later Akiyama gets back in control, and he's really great at showing vulnerability at the right moments. I mean, when that allows Nakajima to get in all sorts of really sweet cut-off attempts. I mean, the best one for me is when Akiyama's head is resting on the bottom turnbuckle, and then Nakajima just kicks that bottom turnbuckle. I love that. This match is great. I mean, it takes up hardly any of your time and doesn't waste any of that time either. So definitely watch it. I really loved it. Elsewhere on the card, we've got Kensuke versus Morishima. I would say the word unimaginative would be appropriate here. I mean, they do what you'd expect them to do, and that's definitely enjoyable for what it's worth, but at the same time, the match isn't structured in a way that makes either guy particularly memorable. I mean, it's a back and forth heavyweight battle, which is fun, you like it, but at the same time, they don't really do anything unexpected, and you don't come out of it thinking that any differently about either guy. I mean, it's fine for what it is, but it's kind of there for me. I thought it was just kind of there, but I still enjoyed it. I had no problems with it, so there is that. Then we got Kentaro versus Kanemaru, GHC Jr Heavyweight Championship. This was solid. This was fine. I mean, it's not like the Marvin match where the problem is just so obvious that you find it hard to enjoy. This didn't do anything wrong, but it didn't do anything particularly good either, but it was fine. I mean, Kanemaru kind of did a bit of a working over this stomach area, which is harder to blatantly no-sell that area, so, it was fine. It was fine. But while we're on the subject of Kentaro, let's talk about where he stands right now. I mean, one thing that should happen, that's bound to happen, and it might even happen in the immediate future, is a title match against Kenta. That's inevitable. That's wise. I mean, he got his match against Kanemaru, and Kenta was the one who got the big heel turn, so he's probably the most important guy in that whole contingent. So Kenta is the next step up from Kanemaru in a kayfabe sense, and it probably would be a worthwhile match as well. I mean, the last time they had a match, Kenta pretty much carried Kentaro to something worthwhile, so I'd be somewhat interested in that. Ordinarily, I'd say Kenta has no reason to be the GHC Jr Heavyweight Champion again, but now that he's heel, they might want to give his heel run the ultimate stamp of approval and give him the title. So that's a possibility, I'd definitely say. But also, I think there's an equal chance that they're going to give Kentaro a long reign, because he's always been Masao's guy. He was Masao's student, so that good standing it lingers on, I guess you could say. So they definitely could give him a long reign. But if they're going to do that, though, they definitely need to start. They maybe need to give him some New Japan guys to go against, because add a bit more appeal to the matches. I mean, there's no one really that I'd be particularly interested in, other than, I guess, Liger and Kanemoto. I mean, veteran, junior, and outsider, that could be really appealing. But they definitely need to do something to, make the title matches more appealing. Bring in some New Japan guys, or make it an extended program with Kenta. Do something. I mean, don't just have him monotonously beat everybody. I don't want to see that. So on to the main event. Sugiura versus Shiozaki, GHC Heavyweight Championship. Ariake again, once again making this a hard one to enjoy, but even after you get through the crowd, this is far from perfect. I mean, this is very much a lesser version of the match they had in September 2010, and the difference to me is very, very simple. It's all to do with the levels of brutality that they brought to the match. In September, they did a much better job of establishing chop versus elbow. Some of those were bleeding chops even, and it was brutal enough so when they stopped, you could stop sometimes to let things sink in. Here, after they do a really good job of establishing the brutal tone of the match, and they do a very good job of that, I will say that, they don't advance it though, they don't progress it, they don't capitalize on it, and the points in this one where they're stopping to let things sink in, they don't work in the same way. They don't work in this match. I mean, it really didn't feel like they were stopping to let things sink in, to sell the brutality of the match. It felt like they were stopping for no reason, really. I felt like they were stopping just to stop. And, I mean, Sugiura has this thing. He'll hit a big move, and then he'll stand back and wait to charge. He probably did do that in the last Shiozaki match, and it worked because of the reasons I went over. Here it was like, okay, why aren't you going in for the kill? You've got the advantage, go is down, so use that advantage. I mean, that sort of annoyance was prevalent throughout the middle of the match for me. Like I said, the start of it was very good. I also like the finish stretch where they're just building up some momentum over the strike exchanges. So it was a very good match, don't get me wrong. They just made some mistakes that I don't think they should be making, and they probably wouldn't have made those mistakes if the match was shorter, I'll just say that. But Shiozaki won. I thought he looked good winning, and I'm glad he did win, but I just think that it would definitely be easier to remember Sugiura as champion favourably if his reign were 3 or 4 months shorter. I still will remember him fondly though, because he definitely had some really memorable matches in 2010. But I just wish it was a bit shorter. That's all I'm going to say. Okay, so let's move on to Great Voyage in Osaka. It took place just over a week ago and features the return of Kobashi Kenta. Better crowd than the last Osaka show, I will say that. That was the January show that had Takayama versus Kenta and Sugiura versus Bison. That was a weak crowd, but this crowd was marginally better, I thought. And I thought this show as a whole was one of the more consistent Noah shows that they've had this year, so I really enjoyed it. Let's see if we can do a full review of this one. The first match was Taue Akira versus Ogawa Yoshinari. Honestly, this is what Noah openers ought to be more often, I'd say. I mean, it's not any better than the typical Shiga Okita Inoue tag match, but those are drags even at 10 minutes. This one didn't really have any time to get on your nerves, and in the midst of all the light comedy, there actually is a nice little chop sequence from Taue in there, so this was nothing offensive. When it ended, I was just like, okay, ready to start the next match, not down on the show at all, so this was a fine start, nothing offensive to me. I was ready to move on to a 6-man tag. Eddie Edwards, Delirious, and Zack Sabre Jr. versus Jack Evans, Aerostar, and Hiryanagi Genba. It's a fun little spot fest here. I mean, Aerostar is from AAA, and he and Evans do their flippy stuff. There was some funny stuff actually between Genba and Delirious. It's like, okay, there's a language barrier already, but Delirious is talking nonsense, so that kind of makes it a bit of lighthearted fun. And there was a sequence there where they were all just diving on top of each other, so, the crowd responded well to it, and it was a fun junior spot fest that didn't go for longer than it needed to, and it did its bit to get the crowd going, so I was fine with this. It was kind of fun for what it was. Moving on to another 6-man tag, Mohammed Yone, Taniguchi Shuhei, and Inoue Masao versus Sano Takuma. Aoyagi Masashi, and Hijikata Ryuji. With these mid-card 6-man tags, with these kind of participants, you're basically looking for some comedy and some short bursts of aggression here and there. We got that in very small amounts here, but it still felt satisfying for what it was. There was a sweet little elbow exchange here between Sano and Taniguchi, and there was also a funny moment where Inoue was just gearing up for a lariat, but Aoyagi wouldn't get up, so it had enough of moments of fun spread out for me to enjoy it, and it held my interest pretty well, so I liked it. No problems there. Show is getting consistently better as it goes on. That's what I want to see from these. If you're going to start at the bottom, work your way up. That's what this show was doing, so I was happy. We got on to Ricky Marvin and Rocky Marvin versus Kotoge Atsushi and Harada Daisuke. This is the first of 3 tournament matches on this show. The NTV Cup, which is an annual juniors tag tournament. This is a match with Noah versus Osaka Pro, and I like this match. I wasn't expecting too much, but Ricky Marvin I think definitely looked pretty sharp here. When he was the guy that was waiting to be tagged in, he was very active in that role. He was, trying to get the crowd into it, doing the tag partner mannerisms, that are very basic, but a lot of guys just kind of toss to the side for sometimes. And then he and Rocky, did some pretty good tandem moves. Ricky was good at pushing forward and minimizing the impact of the one botch in the match. So he was the best guy here by a good bit, and there was some good tag team moves. So I was enjoying myself. This was just good. This was good. This was fine. Enjoyable enough. Then we got Kenta and Kanemaru Yoshinobu versus Takaiwa Tatsuhito and Namaguchi Osamu. This was boring, no other way to say it. This was probably the only weak point of the show. They didn't do anything wrong. This was not boring in an indie overkill sort of way, but it was boring in a they didn't do anything memorable sort of way. I mean, at the start of it, Namaguchi and Takaiwa are working over Kenta. They were nothing special in that role. There was no building or excitement for a hot tag, and after a while they just lost direction completely. So this is nothing worth watching. The only weak point on the show, though, so that's definitely a positive. I was ready to swiftly move on, and we will move on to the final tournament match on this show. It's not the final of the tournament. Suzuki Kotaro and Aoki Atsushi versus Nakajima Katsuhiko and Kajiwara Satoshi. I had some expectations going in for the Nakajima Aoki stuff, but actually this is more about Nakajima versus Kotaro, and I wasn't expecting this. They actually played off their previous match. I mean, it wasn't tremendous previous match referencing, but it's still a sign of creative effort, which I definitely like to see, and it's a recognition actually of the quality of that match, and maybe a sign that we're going to see another match between those two, which I would definitely be all for. So yeah, this was a good match. The Kotaro versus Nakajima sections are good enough to make this a solid, good match. The rest of it was a bit ordinary, but I still definitely liked it. I was positive about the show. And we go from positive to positive with Sugiura versus Kensuke. What can I say? Where was this match when, during the last 4, 5, 6 months of Sugiura's reign? This was great. I really, really like this. I mean, Sugiura does his part in moments. He's good at selling fatigue, and that will become important later on. But really, this is carried by Kensuke's charisma, and that was helped by Hokuto being at ringside, helping the big match atmosphere along. This is pretty much chop versus elbow, but like I said, Sugiura steps it up with how he sells fatigue here, which puts it in a different league than the, like, say, Kensuke versus Morishima match, for example. The one thing I'll say, though, is Sugiura's timing for big spots is generally bad. I mean, there is actually one good Sugiura transition where he blocked a suplex and pushed ahead, but otherwise, the German suplex turnbuckle spot was given away too early with very little struggle. And again, Sugiura never really creates drama around the Olympic Slam anymore. It just seems to happen randomly and bears no importance to the match at all. It's almost as bad as Tanahashi's frog splash. So those were negatives there. But like I said, Kensuke's charisma carries it. I loved how he just started punching the side of Sugiura's face as things got more heated. The unusual ending was pretty well executed. And I really enjoyed this match. Not top 10 worthy, but definitely one of the best matches of the year so far. Definitely, I really, really enjoyed this thing. Then we got Giant Bernard and Carl Anderson versus Morishima Takeshi and Yoshie Yutaka for the GHC Tag Team Championships. I think Morishima and Yoshie deserve a lot of credit here. I think they really gave a lot of effort, and both guys were used really well in this match. The biggest mistake, and this was made by Bad Intentions, was not playing to the crowd more, because every time that Bad Intentions did something to the crowd, they got booed hard. There was a lot of crowd heat there, and if they had capitalized on that, this could have had a similar atmosphere to the Big Japan versus All Japan tag from April. Sekimoto and Okabayashi versus Soya and Hama. It didn't quite reach that level, but it was still a very, very solid tag match. They found a focus with Yoshie getting his leg worked over. It wasn't a strong focus though, and that's a good thing, because Yoshie's main strength isn't to sell limb damage, it's just to give, you know, heavyweight strength spots. So it was good that it wasn't a strong focus. He got tagged out, Morishima came in, did some good stuff, and then, you know, Yoshie came back and had a very memorable moment where he was just charging into both guys. Morishima bullied Anderson a bit, he actually busted out some dives as well. So the effort was there. Just with a bit more excitement to near falls, this could have been a great tag match, but as it stands, it's just a very solid effort. You know, matches like this, I really hope that Bernard and Anderson get a very extended reign in Noah as the tag champs. Can't really see that happening. I'm sure it won't only last a few months, but if it lasts any bit longer, it'll definitely be very welcome. This is a good standard of tag match right here. So that was great. That was very fun. Then we got the main event, Akiyama Jun and Saito Akitoshi versus Shiozaki Go and the returning Kobashi Kenta. Once you get past the appeal of seeing Kobashi again, this is actually a hard one to judge, because even though they don't focus on much throughout the match, it felt like they were doing a better job of filling 30 minutes of time than most guys would these days. I mean, for a lot of matches, it's very easy to say that it would have been better if it were shorter. With this one, you can't really say that, but at the same time, they didn't feel like they had a story to tell that needed 30 minutes. But again, I was never bored watching this. The things, though, would need to be great. More hot fighting would have been very nice. Some follow-through on the arm work on Kobashi would have been very essential. I mean, you can call it a double standard if you like, but Kobashi is charismatic enough to no-sell stuff and not kill the match doing it, but it still prevents the match from being great, I'd say. That was the case here, but even so, the match would have been a lot better if there was some follow-through on that. And really, they just needed something to focus on and make the match memorable for it. Aside from that, though, it's really, really good. Kobashi looked excellent, I'd say. I mean, anyone who was worried that he was going to embarrass himself, I think, can put those fears to rest. Some people might make a big deal of all the bumps that he took, but that's not my business, I don't think. So, consistent crowd support for him during the match, which actually wasn't really there during his entrance, which was kind of surprising to me. He teased a big move that you knew perfectly well he wouldn't be able to hit at this stage, but it was a great tease. And the second half, or the finished stretch of this match, is all about Kobashi versus Akiyama, and with Shiozaki trying every so often to interject himself. It was, again, it didn't have much of a focus to it, the match didn't, but for some reason, I can't quite put my finger on it. It felt like they were filling the time really well. So I thought it was a really enjoyable match. Kobashi showed that he's still physically competent enough to the point where if he wrestles a smart match with a clear focus, it could still be something very special. Really good show, I thought, definitely, with a match that everyone needs to check out in Sugiura versus Kensuke. Recommended by me, I would definitely say that. Okay, so I just want to talk about the G1 Climax really quickly. It starts tomorrow. By the time a lot of you will see this, it'll probably already be going on. The first night of action will probably already be ongoing. It is the biggest tournament in Japan all year, and matches on the tournament have a tendency of over-delivering, I would say, because New Japan heavyweight style is more suited to shorter, full blast sort of matches than that you're going to see more of in a tournament setting. And the thing about this year's, though, is they've overloaded it. It's hard to get around that. 20-man tournament. I mean, even though, in fairness, once you look at the guys that are in it, and I'll put them in the description box, once you take out the guys that don't have at least some justification for being in there, you still have 16 guys. 14 at the very least, but I would say 16. So, you know, you have to take that into account. It would definitely still be better. It would definitely still be an improvement if we had just 16, but, you know, what are you going to do? The thing about the tournament is, like I said, if you see a pairing that, at its best, could be very good, it has a better chance of being good in the G1. You know, like take the first night of the tournament, for example, this year. It has Kojima Satoshi versus Suzuki Minoru. Without having seen their July pay-per-view match, my expectations for that would be, it'll be at least decent. probably no more than good, but at its very best, could be something very special. I mean, you have a better chance of getting that special match in the G1. That's what I'll say. And there are plenty of good, potentially good special combinations that I wouldn't normally be too excited for. As far as predicting a winner is concerned, last year's winner was Kojima, a guy who had been in All Japan for much of the last decade, came back to New Japan 2 weeks before the tournament and ended up winning. So that tells me that Suzuki, who already has been in New Japan, back in New Japan for a few months, should be a very strong contender. And then there's Nakamura, who you have to assume that he's the biggest New Japan mainstay that hasn't won the G1 yet. So you have to assume that he's going to win one eventually. It's just a matter of what year. This year has as good a chance as any of being that year. And then there's Makabe, who hasn't done much outside. He has an outside chance because he hasn't done much this year at all, and they haven't done Tanahashi versus Makabe yet. Whereas Tanahashi versus Nakamura is something we've seen already this year. Whoever wins, though, I would say that there's no chance they're going to be beating Tanahashi. Well, there is some chance, but I would say they're not going to beat Tanahashi in the immediate championship match. I'm sure that he is going to be champion on the January 4th, 2012 show. But whether he'll be champion after that is a different story. So I'll put the card for the first night down in the description box. The first night G1 Climax usually brings some surprises with it. Last year, Carl Anderson went over Tanahashi, and Naito went over Makabe, who was the champion at the time. So with that card, I'd say probably the biggest thing they could do this year on the first night is put MVP over Nakamura. From a wrestling standpoint, I don't see how you can do that believably, because Nakamura has that credible, strong style edge to him that just makes him feel so superior to MVP. But they want to push MVP. It's not like I wouldn't understand where they're coming from if that did happen. I just don't see how, in the context of a wrestling match, how you can pull that off believably. But that's just me. Otherwise, on that card, Nagata over Tanahashi would be something surprising. But it looks like a decent card, and I'll try to give you guys a sense of what I think was the best stuff from this year's tournament. And that's all for me today. I'll see you guys later.